Hi, Gene Hamm again, reading another excerpt from my book, How to Get a Job in Animation and Keep It. This is about my one foray into live action, working for Roger Corman and James Cameron. As I mentioned earlier, you should learn how to work in live action. There'll be times when there are no animation jobs and you have to work in live action. If you know a little bit about all aspects of filmmaking, you'll be versatile enough to be always employed in some aspects of the business. When I worked in animation, you worked for 6 months on a project and were on unemployment for 6 months. I remember going to the theater to see a reissue of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In one scene, Warren J. Kemmerling played a general in charge of keeping people away from the mountain where the UFO was landing. The next day at the unemployment office, I saw Kemmerling ahead of me in line waiting to get his check. The unemployment office sent me out to New World Pictures to try out as a model maker in their new special effects house. Chuck Comiskey, the head of the effects department, turned me down because I hadn't had much experience building models. But he sent me to the main office to talk to Mary Ann Fisher. New World Pictures was Roger Corman's company. He was a big hero of mine, known as the King of the Bees. He had made a string of Edgar Allan Poe movies in the 60s starring Vincent Price and made The Wild Angels, which had inspired Easy Rider. He gave some of Hollywood's biggest directors and actors their first job, including Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Jack Nicholson, and Robert De Niro. Now he owned his own studio. He was making a picture called Battle Beyond the Stars, written by John Sayles. It was essentially the Seven Samurai in space. He started his own special effects unit to keep costs down. I was assigned to decorate sets and build props for an art director I never heard of. His name was James Cameron. I saw him only once every morning when he would give us our orders for the day. He paired me with the brilliant artist Brent Scrivener, who poured the original mold for the rock group Devo's flower pot hats. The set I was working on was the ship piloted by Richard Thomas, who had played John Boy on the Waltons. Cameron had a good eye for making expensive-looking sets out of cheap material. The corridor of the spaceship was lined with what appeared to be vacuum-formed aluminum walls. The walls were really made of styrofoam sandwich boxes, opened up, hot glued to the wall, and spray-painted silver. The ceiling, where I was stringing lights, was made of a series of bread trays borrowed from a bakery with sheets of translucent plastic laid on top of them. Richard Thomas spent all day sitting in a dentist's chair, pretending to fly his ship. His gun on the set was a dentist drill, with the head of a parking meter on its side bolted to the drill. Glued to the parking meter head were two handles of kids' cowboy guns. When he fired it, they would cut to a shot of a model with a ray gun effect superimposed on it. They had two camera setups. One was set up from the outside, looking in through the windshield of the ship to catch Thomas's face. The other shot was an over-the-shoulder shot from the inside of the ship, looking out the windshield at the stars. They draped black velvet over the windshield so they could mat the stars in later. Each time they had to do an over-the-shoulder shot, they had to move the set across the stage to have room to move the camera in. I guess the budget didn't include casters on the set. We had to have 20 guys pick up the set and carry it across the stage. The gun was built into the plywood dashboard, and as we picked up the set, the heavy gun dragged, and we could hear a cracking sound as it began to tear the set apart. They had to have 4 guys lifting the gun so it didn't destroy the set as we moved. After the camera crew had completed their interiors, we in the art department had to go in and patch and repaint all the places where they had scratched, chipped, and dented the set with the camera dolly. It was Thomas's last day of shooting, but they needed him back for an extra day of pickup shots. He informed them that he wouldn't come back unless they fixed that gun. It didn't pull out far enough to quite reach the chair, and he had twisted his back trying to make the close-ups look right. At about 9 o'clock, Cameron told us that we needed to have that gun fixed by 8 the next morning. By then, all the hardware stores were closed. Brent had something else he had to work on, so he left me to figure out how to fix that gun. I'm not the most mechanical person in the world. In fact, I'm not left-brained at all. I sat in the chair that Thomas sat in and pulled the gun out as far as I could. It only came out as far as my left hip. I pulled it back and forth, just idly looking at it. Then I noticed something. I ran to find Brett. Do you know this whole gun is attached to the dentist drill by one bolt? Have you ever seen those metal shelves that look like erector sets? If you took one of those metal braces with the slots in them that hold up the shelves, you could extend this out a foot or two. His face brightened. I know where there's a set of those shelves. Everyone had locked up and gone home for the night. We were the only ones in the studio. He ran down the hall, kicked open a locked door, and entered the office of one of the producers. The producer had one of those metal shelves filled with books. Brent removed all the books and piled them on the producer's desk. He unbolted the slotted metal brace, took it in the machine shop, and ground off the corners so it wouldn't cut anyone. Then he gave it to me. I unbolted the gun from the dentist drill, replaced it with a slotted metal brace, and rebolted the gun to the brace. Now the gun came out far enough. We stayed up all night and were there at 8 in the morning when Richard Thomas arrived. He was very pleased with the gun. Everyone was fine until 9 when the producer showed up. He was madder than hell. He wanted to know who had broken into his office and he wanted them fired. They had to call Roger Corman to straighten things out. Brent explained the situation to Corman, and I heard Corman quietly calm down the producer by telling him, "We can buy you a new door and some new shelves, but we can't buy a new movie." Robert Rodriguez, the creator of Spy Kids and Sin City, recommends in his wonderful book, Rebel Without a Crew, that you learn something about every aspect of filmmaking so that you can either make a whole film yourself, as he does, or at least be able to communicate with every member of the crew. I recommend the same thing for another reason. If you know all the technical aspects of filmmaking, you'll be able to counter negative people on your crew who tell you something can't be done. Sometimes the technical people throw roadblocks in your way just to test you. One time I was creating special effects for the Jimi Hendrix music video, Purple Haze. We hired a camera service to shoot our animation. The camera service was a small business consisting of one man and one animation camera. We wanted to have an effect where we shot an oscilloscope that visualized the sound waves of Hendrix's guitar playing. The owner of the camera service announced to me, "It just can't be done." "Why not?" "That's an impossible shot." "Well, we could lay the guitar across the camera bed and we could shoot it from above, couldn't we?" "Yes." Then in another pass, we could remove the guitar and project the footage of the oscilloscope down where the strings were, couldn't we? Yes. Then we just superimposed the footage of the oscilloscope registered to the shot of the guitar strings, and it'll look like guitar strings are vibrating like an oscilloscope. "Well, of course, if you do it that way, it'll work." He was testing me to see if I knew what I was doing. I have to make a little note here, it's not in the book. When I say making a video of Purple Haze, this was in the 80s, not in the 60s. I'm not that old. The manager was still making money off of Jimi Hendrix even after he died. That's it for today.